Camping in tents. Who would have thought you needed survival skills to attend the allegedly premier universities of America? Across our nation, college students are siding with terrorists, calling for safe space and inclusivity, and simultaneously leading violent takeovers, and yes, living in tents. What has happened to education in America? Today on the Biblical Worldview Show, I am joined by RenewaNation's Ron Gordon and Tonya Gordon, and we are going to be looking at education through the lens of Scripture. All right, we are in the middle of an amazing discussion with Ron and Tonya Gordon, both employees at RenewaNation. Ron being the number 2 underneath Jeff Keaton, who of course has been on the show many times before. And Ron is really the day-to-day overseer of all the pieces and the moving of things that are going on. Tonya is heavily involved in the REAP program at RenewaNation. I'm looking up for what it stands for, the RenewaNation Educator Advancement Program. And basically what Tonya is doing is helping educators really grasp this concept of biblical worldview. As we ended episode 1 of this series, definitely go back and listen to that if you haven't yet. It'll provide some needed context. But I asked the question, are all schools that have Christian in the name, are they really Christian? And we're going to cover that a little bit later in this episode. But I wanted to start more with the purpose and value of Christian education. And Ron, I know you oversee a lot of the finances at RenewaNation. And so as a financial person, and of course, Tonya, I think this is a question that'd be great for both of you guys. But I think there'd be a lot of Christians that would say, we could send our money to missionaries and public school is free. Why not send our kids to public school and save the money? Isn't that better stewardship? And what would you say to that objection?
So I'll start, and I'll come from 2 different angles. First of all, I'll do it from the practical side of the money. And there were a lot of negative things that came out of COVID. But one good thing that came out was the exposure of what's really happening in the public school system and schools across the country. And so that really triggered a lot of interest and a lot of push towards school choice. So today we have about, I think it's 29 states, and the number keeps growing. So that may be dated by the time this podcast gets produced, but 29 states that have some level of school choice options for families, parents to access private school funds for their children. There's 12 states that is full scholarship potential to get they're basically a full ride to a Christian school. So there's a lot of options on just a fiscal perspective to take a look at. So that's number 1. Number 2, the other aspect of this is there is a cost. There is no education that is free education. Education, by the very nature of it, is how we train, how we develop our children. Education was once defined, the 1828 definition. It was about understanding. It was about character development. It was a much broader aspect. If you read the 1828 version, it looks drastically different than the education today. Education is defined today basically as knowledge and information transfer, skills development. It has nothing to do with our moral character, our conscience, and ultimately for a Christian, our eternity. And the cost that we're giving up by not having our children being developed with a biblical worldview has eternal ramifications that are far outweigh the dollars associated with that cost. The cost is enormous. George Barna, which we all know, has great research, And one of those statistics that always stands out to me, and I totally have seen this happen, the worldview of a 13-year-old, by the time that a child has developed a worldview at 13, it's the same one that they typically, statistically, will die with. We don't have time to start spending money of investment dollars for college education and just saving money to that point. You've lost the opportunity for not just their mind, but their heart, their spirit. Yeah. And that's where we need to really understand what we're talking about with investment into Christian education.
I would add to this, and Tonya, I'm curious to hear what you have to say, but I would add to the fiscal discussion as one of value. If you, some people joke about the fast food chain Five Guys because of how expensive it is. My wife is not she's not a big burger person, but she'll go to Five Guys because the burger is better there. We could expand that many times over and go like, well, why would you pay more for this than for this? And it's because you recognize the value in it. Now, sometimes we're bad at recognizing value, right? Like I saw the other day, somebody putting like this piece of junk, trash with a logo on it. And now it's a potted plant, and we're recycling it. Like that's a poor, and it was like $150 and it was literally a piece of trash. So we can value bad things, but I think like when it comes to our child's education, what else could you value more as a parent? Like you have to give your kid food and water and knowledge, right? This is what they need. And we're just going like, oh, this is free over here. Well, you get what you pay for. And one is destroying your child's worldview. The other is enhancing, and I think value is really important. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but as we kind of begin part 2 here, I think it's so important to understand that a child with a biblical worldview sees everything in the world differently, and that's worth, in my opinion, almost any investment. Well, I don't know, Tonya, do you have some thoughts on that as well?
I certainly agree with all that you just said, Ben, and Ron as well. It's all about priority. We find ways to put a cell phone into their hands. And that cell phone has just opened up the entirety of the world and all the differing worldviews that are being propagated through that. So, Dr. Glenn Schultz talks about a 3-core dimension of the family, the church, and the home. Well, if
family, church, and school, right?
I'm sorry, family, church, and school. I apologize.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
If we're, as parents, it is our responsibility to prioritize their education because we are responsible for the worldview that is being cultivated into our children. And by election, we are making a choice by who educates our children. We're responsible for that, and we will speak to that one day.
If you haven't seen episode 1, we really nailed down the differences, but let me highlight this because I still think some people are like, it's basically the same. There's no difference. I was talking to a public educator who was bragging about the fact that she wrote the words Merry Christmas on her whiteboard and the school did not take those words down. And to her, that was an amazing Christian victory in the classroom. Saying the words Merry Christmas. And this is what is a strong Christian woman, I believe. I don't necessarily agree with but the thing is that there is an environment that is so anti-God that you think of victory as just saying the words Merry Christmas when the entire world, it's like the devil doesn't care if you say Merry Christmas if he can destroy their entire worldview. And that's the level we're dealing with. And many people who think public schools are safe think of the public schools of the 1980s, and I would even challenge those, but the ones today are so demonstrably different than Christian education. It almost seems like the choice is very clear to all of us.
Absolutely.
All right, so let me check the time. Where are we at? 7 minutes. Okay, great. So we're gonna keep diving in here with this discussion. Here's the question, Ron and Tonya. Are all schools, like if they have Christian in the name, that means they're a Christian school, right? And if they're a Christian teacher, that means they're a Christian, right? Like that's that, like it says it right there in the name. It's a Christian school. So all Christian schools must be the same, right?
I'm afraid not. So, we do a program called Christian School Renewal, where we go in and try to help support Christian schools that want to do a better job. And unfortunately, the variation that we find is significant. And that's just the ones that even recognize that they need help or want help, right? Yeah. So there is a lot of different aspects of the strength of a Christian school. There are a lot of schools today, Christian schools, that still are not using Christian textbooks, right? So they're still thinking that textbooks that are from the secular perspective are higher rigor. That's not true. We have stronger publishers today than we did 15, 20 years ago that are putting out really strong material from an academic standpoint, but they're also biblically founded. They're based on biblical principle. And so that's just a starting point. There's a lot of folks, and I'll let Tonya talk to this one, that think from a teacher perspective that prayer, starting prayer and devotion is all you need. I'll let her hit that one. She'll
I want to hear from you. And I think there are many Christians, some of which sadly are even in Christian schools, that embrace the secular sacred divide. So they'll start their class with prayer and then go, okay, we got the God stuff out of the way. Let's get that. And they're not seeing that this is incorporated. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Tonya.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick that one to Tonya in just a second. But the other piece of it that becomes a passion is a Christian school gets on a path sometimes towards a significant focus that is not around their biblical foundation. They go towards sports, or they go towards either high academics, right? That the focus is which colleges did our graduates get into, or maybe a drama or a choir. Their passion becomes something other than what its original purpose was, and that's to have a biblical understanding of all of life, right? So that is another key thing to be looking at, and that's something as a parent, when you're making decisions to be that someone to do the schooling as a surrogate to our parent responsibility, you have to be thinking about all those different things, and you need to be vetting, right? What's happening in a lot of those dimensions. The where the rubber meets the road, though, is in the classroom between the teacher and the student. And I'm going to kick it to Tonya for that aspect, that what she's seen there.
So Ben, most educators have been taught to teach in a public school. So as an academic dean of a Christian school, I even had teachers who had been trained in a Christian university or college come into my office and say, what do you mean by teach from a biblical worldview?
Wow.
What does that even look like? So they're not being prepared. And so where we have to meet them is really belongs in the responsibility of administration of a Christian school. It's all about the leadership and the tone that they set, because we can't go backwards and pull them in, but we can certainly start from there and start training them appropriately using professional development to help them even understand what a biblical worldview is. This is not a commonly used wording, either in the church or even in education, or even in the home. Even though these three entities are responsible for worldview formation, they a lot of times there's not a familiarity to that phrasing. So we have to start there. And we also have to start with cultivating in our educators, our Christian educators, their own biblical worldview. So what's happening with a lot of Christian schools is, yes, there's a somewhat of a vetting process where we say, okay, well, are you a Christian? And they say yes. Or do you attend church? Yes. Okay, that checks all the boxes. And yet we're telling them to teach from a biblical worldview, and that's a very foreign concept to them. And so what do? They default to what we do in a Sunday school class, right? They start with prayer, and they take prayer requests, and they do a devotion, and then they think they've done that. They've done what they've been asked to do. And if we're not training them and cultivating them in their own biblical worldview, then we're really not setting them up for the discipleship that should be happening in the classroom, because that's what they're being called to. When we choose to pursue a calling in Christian education, we are basically agreeing to the discipleship of these children and also their families, because part of the equipping, the way that the education structure has been, again, we go back, we've said to the family, no, this is our job. You just let us do our job. Well, that as Christian educators, we need to bring them alongside and equip them so that in a partnership that we're both working on the biblical worldview formation of the children. And so it's incredibly important that Christian education leadership is pouring into their teachers so that the teachers can pour rightly into their students. That also looks very different than the way you approach education. For instance, we talk about math and science and English. We say that's subject matter, right? We all kind of use that. Well, we need to change our language, because that's something that takes God out of it. In fact, when we train Christian educators, we call it creation content, because that brings God back into the conversation. Math is God's. English is God's.
Amen.
All of it is His. And so we can even start showing them that even by some of the things that we've adopted, how we relate to some of these things, we can change just by changing even the wording. Because when you can't help but say to approach a lesson plan when you are looking at creation content, because that brings God right back into the lesson plan. And our professional development has to do that. And so it's a holistic approach to the way we need to change the way we educate children biblically based on the scripture of God.
Ooh, that is so well said. And I think it's a great reminder for us on the show is the term biblical worldview is not in the Bible. The concept is this idea that the Bible is not part of this sacred secular divide. It is a way of thinking about all of life that's going, the Bible is authoritative to every part of life. And so if that concept is iterated with different words 100 years from now, it honestly doesn't bother me. We're not here to stand on the term biblical worldview. What we want is the concept of God is the authority. His word is the authority. He is the creator. And what does that look like as I teach his content, his creation content? I love that. I'm curious, I'm going to put you on the spot. That is such a great example. And I know you are regular, like this is your job at RenewaNation, is to help walk teachers through this. Are there any other specific examples you could give like that come to the top of your mind that you'd be like, oh, here's another example of how we incorporate this concept of biblical worldview? Oh, and by the way, we have totally blown the time. Oh, that's not bad. Let's take a break and give Tonya a chance to think about that. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to look into that. You're watching the Biblical Worldview Show, a ministry of RenewaNation. When we come back, more about how we can shape and think about education biblically. The Biblical Worldview Show is a ministry of RenewaNation in partnership with the Center for Truth and Love. We are supported by faithful partners who want to invest in life-saving and life-changing kingdom impact. If the show is helpful to you, you can support us by subscribing, following, and sharing. You also can support us through giving. Make a tax-deductible financial investment today at RenewaNation.org. One of the dangers Christian culture is susceptible to is being led by our critics. Unfortunately, our public school curriculums are filled with untruth, and most public school teachers teach from a secular worldview. Why do many Christians feel that a second, third, or fourth grader is responsible for bringing light to the confusion of our public school systems? We need to protect our children from untruth, and one of the best ways you can do that as a parent is in your child's education. I want to recommend iLumenEd to you. iLumenEd is an online Christian school that offers full-time enrollment or individual classes. This school uses Christian textbooks, Christian teachers, and presents each subject from a worldview of truth. Let's put the responsibility of being salt and light back on our shoulders and protect and equip our kids so they can grow to be mature believers. Check out iLumenEd today. And we're back on the Biblical Worldview Show, having an important discussion about biblical worldview education. And Tonya, that was such a phenomenal example. Could you throw one more at us of like how a teacher, maybe something they can do that would help them in the classroom and help a parent to help me to think about this better in terms of education?
Absolutely. One thing that certainly would help is to start with the creation mandate. And what does that look, what is that, first of all? And we know that the creation mandate was we were tasked to help partner in as image bearers to steward God's creation. Yeah. And that changes why we learn all that we learn. Because we're not learning for an assignment, we're not learning for a test or a quiz, to give that information back to a teacher so that a grade is given and that we get to pass a grade level, right? That completely takes God out of the process. But if we say we're entering in this year and God has a lot in store for us because the things that we're going to learn this year, we're going to use as dominion caretakers. And we're going, and this is going to help us steward what God has tasked us with. And that completely changes for a child while they're learning what they're learning. And it also helps the educator in preparing their lessons and all the things that they're doing, because now they're opening up a world, a creation that God has created, what God's created in wonderment. And joy, because we get to come alongside him as image bearers and help take care of what he's blessed us with. And that completely changes education altogether.
Oh my goodness, that is phenomenal. I'm so glad I asked that question. That is it. If I can, okay, you said it well enough, I won't echo it. So well said. Okay, so this leads us to the next question then, which is, and for either one of you, but when you don't look at the world that way, what does the world look like when you leave an education system? And I'll tell you right now, I at this point, when someone comes to me and brags about their child being in an Ivy League school, I'm not going to be inappropriate. I'm not going to speak truth unlovingly. However, if it's at all appropriate, I almost want to apologize that they're wasting their money having their child be indoctrinated. What is coming out of these schools? And I actually just talked with an attorney the other night, and he's like, we have little respect for any Ivy League attorney. Because he's like, they may be able to take a test better than me, but I don't want they're an indoctrinated person. And he goes, we don't hire them. We're not interested. This guy is a senior partner at a firm. He's like, I'm not interested in hiring Ivy League graduates. And that's one example. But what are some other examples of how in culture at large, a poor paradigm of education has had an effect on the culture at large?
We're told in Scripture, we'll know them by their fruits, right? And that plays not just whether they're a believer, but the fruits of what we see from public education system and the general education, which has been 90+% of our population over the past several decades, is where we see today's culture, right? We are struggling in every way. We don't even know if we're boys and girls anymore, right? Wow. This has gotten ludicrous on where we have come. So education is a central part. You go look at history, and you see time and time again, from leadership of Hitler to Lenin to even our own country has understood. You give me the education, and then two generations beyond, I'll have exactly what I want, right? And that's where we're at today. We have reaped what we have sown. And it's a struggle, right? So in the day-to-day, what does that look like practically? I know several business owners, and they are struggling with finding good workers, morally strong workers, ones that have a solid work ethic, that they can rely on to be there, right, every day and on time, and put their hard work into it. So that plays out every day. So those that have went through Christian education, they have a leg up starting out because they morally they're just stronger. They're stronger just because of how they've been developed, how they've been trained, not just their knowledge, but even more so their character development.
I'd add just the ability to think critically. And like when you read a headline, do you just go, well, if CNN said it, it must be true? Or are you able to go, okay, here's what part of this is true, here's what part of this is false, but I also know that there's another aspect here that's not even written in this article, but I know to be true, and that wasn't referenced, and so I think that's huge. So much we could talk about. As we kind of conclude here, what are some ways that if someone is going, hey, I want to get involved in Christian education, RenewaNation is here, and it has kind of become a household name in Christian education, and I'm so thankful for that. But what are some ways that somebody could reach out to RenewaNation to get some help? I mean, can if somebody wanted to start a Christian school, can they find a job? Can they, what can they do?
Yeah. So absolutely, for Christian education, if you are a parent, if you're looking for a Christian school, and there's several areas that still do not have Christian schools, or a Christian school that is aligned with maybe the doctrine of their church, or we help start Christian schools. A lot of different styles. We are not ones that say you need to do it exactly this way. We're just trying to really make sure that they have a biblical perspective of education, of what they're doing. So we support Christian homeschool, hybrids, micro schools, a full traditional Christian school, classical Christian education. Those avenues are certainly ones that if you're interested in doing that, you would reach out to us, and we'd love to help you. If there's a Christian school in your area, or your kids go to a Christian school and you feel like there's some struggles or things that need to be done to help a Christian school, we do that as well. We help support existing Christian schools. And then REAP is a big piece of what we try to do to help strengthen. As you just heard, Tonya, there's a whole plethora of other examples and tools and techniques and things that are part of how do we really strengthen the world of Christian education today.
We have a lot of educators watching and listening to our show. If someone's going like, yeah, I want more from REAP, I know you kind of oversee that, Tonya. How can a single educator get help from REAP? Does it have to be administration down? Do they need to go to their administrator and say, how can someone get connected to REAP?
Well, we want either way. The administration can reach out and schedule professional development with us, and we can either come on site to do that. We've also done it for schools for online training. Also, we just want to come alongside Christian educators and encourage them and pour into them. They have a really hard job. They wear a lot of hats. And one thing that we have a heart for is to do a lot of the research and do a lot of the legwork that they really aren't given a lot of time to do that. So we always want to come alongside if they want to reach out directly to us and say, I'm doing a lesson on this, and I'd really like to get some information on some resources, additional resources that I could use that are trustworthy, that are biblically trustworthy. And so that's another part of what we do is we look at, because the world of education is full of information overload, of all these different resources. And so we want to come alongside and kind of clear out the clutter and get to the resources that really do help with biblical worldview formation and help support that educator. So we have a website that they can reach out to. We just launched a biblical worldview education community on Facebook. Look for us there.
What is the website?
So if you go to, I'll make the easy one, go to RenewaNation.org. Right, and then you can find REAP directly from there, and it has a full REAP website there.
So go to RenewaNation and then go to REAP on RenewaNation.
Also email info@renewanation.org, and we'll get back to you directly.
Great. You were still going though. I interrupted you, Tonya.
We also have conferences every summer. We have one coming up at the very end of July here in our backyard. It's beautiful Smith Mountain Lake. And we approach our conferences a little bit different. We start with an educator's own personal cultivation of their worldview, because they cannot give what they do not have.
Yes.
And they have to really cultivate that and understand that and come from that. So we want to pour into them. So our conferences, or this year's conference, is going to look like how to establish a prayer culture in their school. How can they, we have worship. We speak to how to cultivate an educator's biblical worldview, because we never reach a destination. Our destination is eternity with Christ. So we should have teachable hearts and want to learn as much as we can and continue to cultivate and mature our own biblical worldview. And that's part of what we do. We certainly address all the application part of it in the classroom. And what does that look like? What does it look like to teach math in a biblical way? But all of that becomes formulaic if we do not understand first and foremost what biblical worldview is, and that we're maturing in our own. So we come from it from both sides at our conferences.
Absolutely phenomenal. I don't know when this episode will air, but if not, it will be end of July. Will those be recorded? Can people go and find those sessions once afterwards?
We are going to capture those, and they'll be available on our website.
So, George Barna speaking there, Jeff Keaton. There's a lot of amazing speakers at that one, so that's really cool. All right. Well, you can find more at RenewaNation.org. Check out REAP. Reach out to the Ministry of RenewaNation to find out more of the stuff. Ron and Tonya, I'm thankful for you guys on so many levels. Let me say this, and because I think it's important. When you see an organization, you don't get to see everything. You don't get to see behind the scenes. And these are two people that are working phenomenally behind the scenes, even of the Biblical Worldview Show. And I can tell you, when we discuss things, when we have team meetings, Ron is someone who's patient. He's a strong leader. It's just a real pleasure to work with you, Ron. And the times I've had to spend with Tonya isn't a lot. And then to see what their children are doing, this is a special couple, and this is what is behind some of these organizations. And when they're going in the right direction when they have the type of people that really embrace the mission, and it just encouraging to me. So some things I wanted to say. Anything as we conclude, we are going to kind of wind it down, but I wanted to give you the last word if you had anything else.
No, thank you, Ben. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a blessing to be part of the show, and maybe next time we can do one live in warm, hot, sunny Florida with you.
Come on down. You have been watching the Biblical Worldview Show. I hope you'll take the time to subscribe to this, and you can get other future episodes as they come out. Go to RenewaNation.org for all the resources that we discussed and many, many more. Looking forward to seeing you on our next episode as we look at all of life through God's lens of Scripture. Hey, you're still here. Thank you so much for watching the Biblical Worldview Show. Our show is supported by financial investments from viewers just like you. If you'd like to make a donation to the Biblical Worldview Show, you can do so by going to RenewaNation.org. And don't forget to subscribe and follow our show.